I believe we have Gabriel from Greenville, South Carolina. Good morning, Gabriel. You are live with Pastor Carl. What is your question?
My question is, should I be a groomsman in my friend's wedding who professes to be a Christian but is sleeping and living with his fiancée?
That's a great question, and my simple answer would be no. I would commend your friend to say that, hey, listen, marriage is God's institution and you should be married, but neither do I want to endorse this lifestyle that you're in, so much so that you are confessing Jesus as Lord. By the way, let me ask a question. Is your friend a member of a Bible-believing New Testament church?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, I was going to say if he were, then indeed he should be under church discipline. If your brother sins, reprove him. If he doesn't listen, take it to 2 or 3. If he doesn't listen, bring it to the church. If he doesn't listen to the church, he should be removed. And so, number one, it would be a courtesy and the most loving act for you to go to your friend and say, you know, Joe, I'm thrilled that you want to get married and you want to have a relationship within the confines of marriage. But what you're doing now is evil, and you confess to be a Christian. You're going to have a ceremony that is supposed to be celebrating Christ's relationship with his church, when you are mocking the relationship of purity that he calls his people to. In fact, you've been living in a lifestyle of adultery. And this is what God says about lifestyle. It's not that a Christian couldn't fall into an act of immorality. Let him who thinks he stands be careful lest he fall. We're not talking about perfection. That won't happen until Christ comes again. But we are speaking of direction. And if the direction of a man's life is that of practicing sin, adultery, then Paul says in Galatians 5, he says it in Ephesians 5, he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, that you have all the marks of an unbeliever. And so for me to participate in your wedding, I'm basically saying, okay, you're a Christian, maybe not the best, but you're a Christian. When my bigger concern for you is the fact that you are very potentially not even saved. And so that's speaking the truth in love. And that would put a seed in his heart to get him to think, to get him to evaluate. How far away is the wedding from the time that you've been asked to be a groomsman? Is it 6 months, a year? Is it next week?
It's about a year away.
Yeah, so this is what I would do. I would say, well, look, you know, if you decide that you would like me to participate, I will if either she moves out or you move out and you live a celibate life until, the wedding. Then I can participate. But I can't otherwise. It's just going to be a total mockery for you two to go down that aisle. Everyone will know that you're living together. And for you to celebrate Christ's relationship with the church, which was what marriage is supposed to picture according to Ephesians 5, and I'm there celebrating immorality with you, I can't do that. But if you show the evidences that you really know the Lord and you're willing to move out, I'd be willing to participate and be a part. And I would remind him that walking down the aisle and saying, I do, I will, does not change a man's character. What you walk down the aisle with in your wedding day is the character that you have. It's not that God can't change it, but it's what you have. And if you're living immorally, if you have the character trait of an immoral man, walking down the aisle does not change that. And so it is very wise, in my judgment, for a couple to exercise self-control. One of the things that I do in premarital counseling, and if someone came to me and said, I want to be married, great. It can't be less than 6 months from today. Why? Because that's how long it takes to do the premarital counseling. But before I can even agree to do the premarital counseling, I have to, in my own mind, believe that I can marry them. And one of the questions that they answer in the premarital form is, are you involved in any kind of sexual intimacy? And if so, are you willing to refrain from all sexual intimacy? And we talk about this. Again, if you can't trust your spouse before you're married, what makes you think you can trust them after you're married? And again, that woman, that man shouldn't trust their spouse, because if they will be immoral and break God's holy law now, what makes them think that getting married will change that? And so it's not untypical. You read different stats, but roughly around 60% of couples that live together before they get married end up in a divorce. And the number one reason, is adultery. Again, if a man can't control his passions before he gets married, he won't control them after. But if he does, it brings a great sense of security to that relationship, so that if he were a Marine and he were deployed, or he was working for a company and he has to be, in another state for the weekend or for a couple of weeks, his wife, or he has over his bride, a sense of security that they are being faithful because they were willing to practice that beforehand. And again, who knows? Maybe he is a Christian, and if he is, he'll hear you. He'll definitely hear you, and then he'll confront his bride. And then the question is, what will she do? And maybe she'll take offense at that, which, if he's a real Christian, then he's marrying an unbeliever. I remember meeting with a couple that had visited our church, and I went to share the gospel with them. Actually, I didn't know all the particulars until I got there. They both filled out a visitor's card, but they had different last names at the same address. Occasionally, it is an issue of some woman who wants to keep her maiden name, which is not wise. Again, that would just express a shallow view of male headship that God assigns. The woman doesn't take her husband's name. The man doesn't take the woman's name. The woman takes her husband's name, and part of that is recognizing male headship, which is what God has designed in a healthy marital relationship. And so I asked them, they said, no, we're living together. And of course, I walked them through the plan of salvation. They both bowed their head and received Christ, and they said, well, can we join the church? I said, well, of course not living together, because if your salvation was real tonight, then this relationship will break out. And so, no, I can't baptize you, which is the first step a believer should make, because you would not have shown the evidences that you're a new creature in Christ Jesus. You know what that guy did? The next day he moved out. He lived in the backyard of a fellow Marine and set up a tent in that Marine's yard with his permission, and lived in a tent for 6 weeks. And then, of course, I couldn't marry them within the time frame they wanted to get married. Then he married her. But still, that showed conversion. That showed evidence. So I hope that helped.
Dr. Carl Broggi answers your questions about the Bible and living the Christian life Tuesday mornings at 11 on The Light, 88.7 FM, and online around the world at wagp.net.